go. Bienvenidos, welcome. Thank you all for being here to join us on this bright November day. My name is Sue Cronmiller, and I am the director of El Sol Conexión and the curator of the Imagining Santa Ana series of public humanities events. This event is being recorded. We will post an edited version at a later time on our YouTube channel. I sound like a robot now. By participating, everyone agrees to be recorded. Please, all attendees, mute your audio during the program. Those of us who will be speaking, we might want to mute just until it's our turn and until, you know, we have our turn to speak. If you have questions and or comments to add to the conversation, please write them out in the chat feature. If there is time, we will read them for group discussion at the end of the program. I'd like to thank our partners who have generously provided support for this program. El Sol Academy of Arts and Sciences in Santa Ana, University Community Links, a network of university and community partners working together to develop innovative after-school programs, the University of California at Irvine, and the California Humanities are co-sponsors with El Sol of the Imagining Santa Ana series of public humanities events, of which today's event is a part. I'd also like to introduce Gary Gaiman, who is here from the Annenberg Center for Public Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. Gary will be our technical support professional for today. Thank you, Gary. Say hi. Dr. Ana Elizabeth Rosas is an associate professor of history and Chicano Latino studies at UC Irvine, and I am honored to introduce her today as a partner and colleague on the University Community Links collaborations with El Sol Academy in Santa Ana. Say hi, Anna. Can we see Anna? Maybe you should take down the slide now. Hi, Anna. Hi. And I'll introduce Dr. Manuel Gomez with one of his own quotes. He's known to say, education is the foundation of the change we want to see. And truly, a giant of a man, a poet, activist, leader of social equity and education, Manuel Gomez has dedicated his entire professional career and more. After his retirement from his post as Vice Chancellor at UCI, he has given us much of his personal time to the educational advancement of all students from all backgrounds. I'm lucky to have known Dr. Gomez for over 20 years, and I'm proud to call him a dear friend, a colleague, and spiritual guide and fellow champion of the arts and humanities in education. I'm having a little tear. And here he is with an invocation of the theme for our program today, which is "You belong here in the garden that heals." Manuel Gomez.
Well, thank you very much, Sue, for that kind introduction. Ana, Rosas, and Gary, Monique, everyone that's helped build this program, I want to thank before I begin my comments. I wanted to just shortly speak for about 10 minutes on this topic and then get as much time with you in question and answer. So I'm going to go kind of hurriedly in a kind of a fast pace to some of the thoughts that I want to give. And I want to begin, besides my thank you and acknowledgement to everyone who worked for this program, with a practice and that I've begun and many other people have begun to acknowledge the ancestral First Nations people who were the first populators of this land, of all of these lands. And I'm in Orange County in Irvine. I don't know where some of you may be elsewhere. So I'm going to honor the Tongva and the Ahashamen peoples of this land that we stand on, that I stand on at this moment today. And as a way of fighting the amnesia of the erasure of this history, of the denial of this history, and worse yet, of the fantasy that these were unpopulated wildernesses, this land. I initiate every talk now that I do with this acknowledgement. And I start with the first poem I ever wrote as a way of honoring the spirit of the ancestors that are still here and that are still fighting to this day for their rights. The poem goes like this. The red sun's sword slashes my soul. Black blood flows from my darkness. I am the son of an ancient people. I cry tears of blood and fire. During the day, I hunt. And at night, I carry mountains on my back. So in Pennsylvania, where Gary is, there's a lot of other tribes, the Delaware, the Shawnee, the Iroquois, the Susquehannock, many other tribes all around. So I just did an honor for the tribes here in Orange County. The poem allows us also as a way of beginning to raise our consciousness, to raise our consciousness together and to focus our attention. Because in a way, the arts or poetry or any art, in a certain way, it's nothing more than the art of paying attention. In this remote virtual world, our listening skills are being challenged. We are now having to focus. So let's stay with this focus of the red sun and one common bond as we proceed in this discussion. In history today, December in 1520, exactly 500 years ago, Cuitlahuac and Tenochtitlan, the ruler that followed Moctezuma, died from smallpox this month in December, 500 years ago in Tenochtitlan. Cuauhtemoc, the young leader, assumed power of Tenochtitlan after that. And the Aztecs, the Mexica, the Tenochtitlan people kept fighting the Spaniards and Cortes until August of 1521. Now, why I concentrate on this 500-year cycle is there is a turning of the wheel that's going on now. There is a rising of consciousness. There is a reconnection with our own past and our own histories that is occurring. And why this is important is we have all still suffering from the traumas, the scars, and the memories of that conquest and that colonization, that many chapters that occurred beyond Tenochtitlan across all these lands with the invasions of the Europeans. The people of this land always have struggled with their sense of who they are and their identity, and to distinguish themselves from the Spaniards, from the outsiders, from the invaders. They called themselves Nican Titlaca, Nican Titlaca. That was their word for them. And what it meant is we, the people from here. That was how Nahuatl translates those terms. And that's how they distinguished themselves. They knew who they were and where they came from and who the strangers were and that they were not from here. And I know that there are a lot of limitations in discussing the Chicano movement, but I just want to mention one quick idea that came out of the movement. That was the creation, the development, the rediscovery of our own homeland in the concept of Aztlán. Aztlán, a mythical homeland of the Chicana people that's here in this land. And with the support of the humanities, Cal Humanities, UC, I want to have a shout out to UC Links, to all my colleagues at UCI, Pennsylvania, Gary, and everywhere else, Charles up there in Berkeley, wherever else other people are, Mara. We've been working here with an extraordinary leader, Monique Davis, of an extraordinary school, charter school called El Sol, Science and Arts Academy here in Santa Ana, California. I could go on for hours talking to you about the accomplishments of this school, but I can't because it would take all day just know that El Sol is a particularly beautiful gem of a learning center in the heart of Santana, California, that's doing great work. We, with our collaborators and a few other people, have been dreaming, designing, playing, discussing, stumbling, moving towards an idea of creating learning experiences to alter the culture, not to alter the culture of the school, to alter the culture of our own perspective as a people in the school and as we proceed learning, to learn, to understand that there are many modes of learning, there are many ways of learning, and that we want to create experiences that liberate the imagination, that begin to decolonize the mentality of our students, of our people, that begin to let them know their true roots, their true stories, their true memories that have been erased in the textbooks, that have been eliminated, that have not been told. And so this change that we're doing, we haven't changed the culture, but we have created a lot of really intriguing, intimate experiences with all of our colleagues and collaborators, stumbling to try to create a culture that will liberate us, to be understanding that we belong here in the Garden of Healing. And in our collaborations, we want to enhance this remembering, this learning to know who we are from the inside, not the outside. There is an inner self that we tend to not remember, because the little girl watches her father go to work every day. And one day, she's 7 years old, she suddenly just gets up and asks her father, "Daddy, where do you go every day?" "I go to work, Laura." "Oh, wow. What do you do, Daddy?" "I teach." "What do you teach?" "I teach art." The little girl says, "What is art?" "Oh, Laura, I teach the students how to draw." And as she's playing with her pencils and her little book, she looks up and her mouth has completely fallen open and she says, "Daddy, you mean they forget?" We forget a lot more than how to draw. We forget ourselves. And many of the school's experiences are the ones that begin to erase our memory of who we are. Last story, real quick. Melissa Nelson, Turtle Mountain, Chippewa, an indigenous writer who writes about an incredible relevant prophecy that I've just learned about 6 months ago, and I'm fascinated with it. It's called the 7th and 8th Fire Prophecy. This is from the Turtle Mountain Chippewa Native tribe, but many, many tribes I've learned since have the same prophecies. It's relevant for our discussion about nativity, place, and identity today. According to the prophecy, Native peoples of North America are currently living in the 7th fire, a time of cultural recovery from the devastating traumas, scars, and hell of the conquest and colonization of the Native mind, body, and spirit. Now, this is where the prophecy really gets interesting, and it touches directly on us. According to the prophecy, urban and rural mixed race people, mixed race, not natives, mestizos, people will rediscover dormant traditional knowledge and practices, create new life ways, and begin to weave together a new culture of modern indigeneity. These will be the new people of the 8th fire, us, devoted to kinship, peace, and reciprocity. Now, isn't that fascinating? Why weren't we told this story in school? Wait a minute, there's more. The last part of the story is the light-skinned people, that's their quote in the prophecy, the light-skinned people will need to make a decision whether they will continue down the path of exploitation, oppression, and destruction, called the scorched earth path, or choose to pursue a new path of respect, reverence, and renewal. And when they join with Native people, a new green path of beauty and peace will prevail. Now, isn't that a great story? That we have not been told, that we have not heard. And this story says something very significant. We are native to this place.
Manuel. I will now turn the program over to Ana Rosas and her students. We love that introduction. Everyone say love, love.
Thank you so much to Dr. Gomez, to Sue, to Gary, to all the students that are here in terms of wanting to share this pathway you just initiated with the imaginary you provided around what we need to not lose sight of in this art of paying attention. And so all of your words really resonated so much in the context of all of what we've all been facing as we transition into this idea of learning together via Zoom. It's been quite a transition, and we hope that today's program is an opportunity to maximize on the connective tissue that it still allows us to share with each other. And so the first student who will be sharing their question with us is Geraldine Santos. And if Gary could turn us over to the PowerPoint, that would be great. And so, there you go. Thank you, Gary.
Hi, Dr. Gomez. My name is Geraldine Santos from Eastville, California. I am currently studying psychological sciences and Chicano Latino studies here at UC Irvine. And after getting the opportunity to read your work, Dancing with the Sun, I was able to gather that your admiration of Manuel Hernandez Trujillo's work stems from Trujillo's level of authenticity and love for Aztec cultural history. So a question I would really love to ask you is, what advice do you have for many of us who are striving to achieve social justice with that same level of love for Indigenous culture as part of our vision of social justice?
Thank you very much for both those questions. The first question regarding how we can become more effective with regard to understanding our own Indigenous roots. I said very quickly that there are many modes of learning. And I think that in speaking generally, we can speak about a distinct Indigenous perspective about learning. It's connected to nature. We learn, and it's connected to place, and it's connected to who we are. Most native names are we, the people of the river, we, the people of the mountain, we, the people of where they are. They're connected to their place. And most of their learning takes place in circles, not squares, not in lines. And there's no use of shame generally. We never use shame in learning. There's no D's and F's. Generally, in the Indigenous perspective of learning, it's an inner process, not an outer process. It's an inside activity that's not a commodity or a paper at the end of a degree, like the Western notion. I'm not attacking either mode of learning, by the way. I want you to understand this. I'm just expressing to you that there are different modes of learning, and there's a distinction, fundamental distinction between how you can learn about our indigeneity, because it's not going to be taught in the university, even in Chicano studies, most likely. It's got to get back to a grounding of your own ancestors, your own history, your own memories. And if you just look in the mirror, you'll see how connected we are to this land and to the people of these lands. Okay. We are the offspring of the conquest. It's hard to admit that because we have a lot of conflicts inside our own cultures. People that want to be white inside our culture, people that are prejudiced inside our culture against themselves, against their own indigenous. Therein you lie all the conflict about our name, Latinx, Chicano, all these things. That's parcel of that. So, but the best thing you can do is go inside.
Okay.
Stop going outside.
Thank you.
Next question. I don't know if you asked me a second question or not. Was there a second question there?
I think that was really well done, Anna. You have to unmute.
We're going to try to get through one question for each student. If we have time, we'll come back to Geraldine and she'll have an opportunity to ask her second question. So now we'll hear from Cassidy.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Dr. Gomez. My name is Cassidy Arias. I am a third You're at UCI and I'm a literary journalism major minoring in sociology. And my question to you today is, in Dancing with the Sun, you describe the artwork, Woodcuts, as vitally important because it centers on where you plan on going and its connection to where you're from with regards to your ancestral heritage. How does knowing your ancestry contribute to one's sense of empowerment and future?
You know, for a long time, I didn't know who I was. All through high school. From elementary, I knew who I was before I started elementary school. Once I entered into elementary school, confusion began. And a form of shame entered into my mind and soul when I was unable to understand it. In the 3rd, 4th grade, I came home and I could no longer say mama, papa. I was embarrassed. I had a thick accent. I couldn't speak English very well. I could only speak Spanish. And I developed my own weird term. I call my mom Mumsy, the closest word I could get to mama, which sounds English, right? And my father, I called him Pops, Popsy, Papa. Close to Papa, close to Mama, but not mother and father. So this is a kind of a profound confusion and shame that enters into the spirit of a young child who doesn't know what's happening. They're being tossed out of one culture into this schooling culture. And the schooling culture has certain objectives and aims in mind, which are not necessarily negative or bad. Learning is important of all kinds of disciplines, all kinds of ways of learning. But the issue of the cultural identity and the suppression of one's sense of self is what the assimilatory machinery of American education has done for centuries. It just chews up different minds and created the American identity. Something very important. However, today, we are still fighting who is an American? What is the American identity? The struggle that we have then is to understand when we discover that we belong here, that this is our place, suddenly our roots go deep and we can no longer be manipulated or transformed into something we don't want to be or something that we are not. It is a profound struggle. The culture is so omnipresent. The oppressive, distractive, attentive, grabbing culture is always attempting to lead you to where they want you to go, not to where you want to go, generally.
Great, thank you. Natalie?
Good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. My name is Natalie Aguilar. I'm currently a 4th year political science and international studies major, and my hometown is Whittier, California, and that's where I reside in right now. So one of my questions for you today is regarding Hispanic serving institutions. As you know, UC Irvine is one of 6 HSIs out of the 9 UC campuses, and recently I have had the privilege to be in conversations with other UC campuses who already are of HSI status or are emerging Hispanic serving institutions, specifically about how criticisms about HSI is beyond retention and graduation rates, and has to do much more with how HSIs prepares and serves Latinx and Hispanic graduates to serve our own surrounding communities post-graduation. Therefore, throughout your robust and compelling trajectory, how have you seen achieving HSI status impact not only UC Irvine, but the entire UC system?
Oh, you guys do have really great questions. You know, the HSIs are something very, very important, but they're not to be compared to the HBUCs or the Native American colleges or the even women colleges that are also sort of disappearing. Those colleges' mission is to serve those constituencies, to serve the Black communities, to serve the Native community, to serve the women's community. HSI's mission is not to serve us. They just became HSIs because we got 25% enrollment. And so the struggle that we have, let's make that a mission statement. Let's address to the chancellors and the presidents, okay, you're proud of HSI, you're boasting all this. Where does it show in the mission that you're going to do something for us and make yourself an HSI through a mission, through something distinct and additive? So I'm a critic of that dimension of thinking HSIs are the end all and be all of where we're going to arrive. We don't have anything near what the HBUCs have, which I admire. I worked in Washington, DC for a while, and I know that the federal government allocates monies to those specific institutional lines. And the struggle goes on every year inside there. The women struggle, the Blacks struggle, and they struggle with each other, and then they get their allocations. I learned that when I was there, and HSIs were not in the game. Anyway, that's one point. Second point, universities. Crucially important. Right now, the media and the courts are so polarized, and our politicians, that the level of distrust in our society is at a dangerous point, very dangerous point. And there's the universities that you're going to see and will be seeing, even though we have a Biden administration from the right, you will see an ongoing campaign to delegitimize university education. They're attacking the tuition aspect. They're attacking the affirmative action aspect. But really, they're not worried about those fights. The fight is to delegitimize the university so that the truth-telling, fact-finding, truth-seeking institution will no longer have any credibility in the larger society. And then we're in real, real trouble. This is the last institution right now, freedom of speech. It's not a freedom of speech issues that are being fought in the universities right now, believe me. I know what freedom of speech fights are. These are setups, they're traps. It's a campaign. So understand that you can't attack your institution because it's just an HSI and then attack it and then destroy it. We did that in the 1960s. I am an activist from the 1960s, and we attacked our wonderful, beautiful base, the university. Most of our chancellors, most of our faculty were not in support of the war, but they were invested in the war. The investment of the overall structure, the boards of advisors. So there was struggles inside the institution, but we shouldn't have attacked our base. We should have went out. We can't repeat that mistake. This cycle, we have to protect the institution, and we have to protect the courts and the media. And all three have been miserable to us. All three have a lousy history of exclusion, of stereotyping, of prejudice, of imprisoning us. And here we are. We have to protect the courts and the media and the universities.
Thank you so much for your for your response. I'm glad to see that, someone of your position and who has seen it all almost in the UC system shares the same criticisms.
That was a great question.